So just so you guys know, today we will be covering a sneak preview into the new BobCAM V6 for SolidWorks. We did a lot of updating. If any of you guys have used any of the other BobCAM products, this is perfect for you. If it's your first time looking at it, it'll be great for you guys to actually see what we offer and how we actually process the data and handle it all. So what we're going to actually do is we're going to start off with the PowerPoint. I'm going to try to go back and forth between the PowerPoint and the software, just kind of show you guys a little sneak preview of what it's going to be able to do, so that way you guys can actually see what's going on. All right. So in this webinar, we're going to cover some of just the basic CAM stuff that we've added, updating some of the mill features. We did release our all-new Lathe system as well into the BobCAM for SolidWorks version. So we will be covering that as well. You guys will just have to go ahead. If you have specific questions while we're going through this, please go ahead and type those away as we're on the subject, and I'll try to answer them as quickly as possible before we move on to too many other subjects. So a couple things, these are just some topics, and we might cover some more than just these topics, but we're going to cover the new Backplot feature, the machining sequence for drilling, the new revamped Lathe system, Gouge checking for 3-axis, thread milling enhancements, and then updating all geometry, and there's obviously other features as well that we'll try to get in here. So the first thing we're going to cover is actually the Backplot feature itself. What it allows you guys to do is instead of having to fully launch the simulator, you guys can actually just bring the tool right into the actual environment as opposed to having to wait for the window to load and it loads all your toolpaths. If you're just trying to see the specific tool and the path in which it's going to travel, you have the ability now to go ahead and open up what we call a backplot, and what it'll do is it'll actually show that tool in the window. Okay. Next, we're going to cover, we added a new option for drilling, allowing you guys to sequence it a little bit different. It also allows you guys to actually go ahead and control a custom direction now, a specific pattern in which the way you want to. You guys can actually manually select the geometry, and BobCAD will actually find the closest hole for you, or you guys can actually go ahead and just have it do a specific path. If you wanted to crisscross it back and forth, you guys have that ability now. All right. So just a second, what we'll do is we'll dive in and start off with those first two, and that way we're kind of just going through everything ourselves. All right. So to start off with the basics here, what we're going to cover first is the backplot feature. So as you guys can see here, I have a pretty basic part just covering some 3-axis options. And we're going to go ahead and initialize the actual backplot feature. So what happens is you guys will actually have your CAM tree over here on the left-hand side. And you guys actually have the ability in here to go up to the actual feature itself. When you right-click on an individual feature, it now exposes an option with a backplot feature. Now once you guys go ahead and you click on the backplot, what it actually does, it brings the actual tool geometry in here. You guys have controls over here where you guys can restart it. You guys can also hit play and watch it start traveling the path. You guys can rotate fully while it's doing this. And you guys also have the ability to go in and actually slow down the progress, speed up the progress if you're trying to just verify. This is just a really good example of being able to see the path in which the tool is going to travel without having to watch the simulation. Now, if you want to see full machine simulation of what it's actually doing with the tool removing stock material, you're going to have that ability as well still with the normal simulation. This just gives you a quicker verifying of the tool and going on from there. All right, so that's the backplot feature. What we're going to do next is we're going to actually go ahead and dive into the actual drilling feature and how that actually works. All right, so this is a great drilling example right here. This is going to allow us to actually go in here to the BobCAM. So initially, just so you guys understand, in the BobCAM, you're working solely off the SolidWorks geometry. You're staying in one environment. You guys don't have to leave. You're going to go ahead and initialize a CAM default in a new job, which is then going to ask you guys if you're doing milling, turning, or mill turn, depending on what you're trying to do. You guys will actually go ahead and go in here to Stock Wizard and initialize it so you can do your setup of your stock. No, you can select the solid body to go ahead, and then you just hit next, and you'll pick, rectangular stock, cylindrical stock. If you're using custom shape stock, that's fine as well. You guys have those options to go in and pick like a wireframe if you want to. And then you guys will hit OK. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to exit out of there. I'm going to delete this job that we just created because we're going to use the one we already have defined. And we're going to right-click on Machine Setup, and you're going to go down here to the actual drill hole. Okay. Now, when you select drill hole, what we also added in when you hit Select Geometry, you actually can go in and select the select hole bodies. And if I select the whole entire solid and I hit OK, what it'll do is it'll process the data, and it recognizes that we have, the hole diameters. Okay, the depth of the holes. Okay. What we're going to do is we're going to hit Next, and what it's going to do is it's going to show grouping 1, which are the outside ones here, okay, and grouping 2, which are the center ones. If you notice now, the software actually recognizes the features in your tree. So based on how you guys do the features in your tree, now the software will actually pick up based off that when you guys actually select the geometry by the body. So what it did was it broke down our 2 drilling groups, and we can give them different names, and we can alter the depths and everything, but it's already picked it up. So if we just hit Next, and we go in and we define our center drill and our drill, you have a machining sequence as well. Now for the actual drill, which says closest, pick order, where you can go in and pick the order you want, Y direction, or X direction, Y direction, and then custom direction, where you guys can do it at angles across the part if you'd like. You can also reverse each operation option, where you can have it reverse back and forth. Okay. Now if I just say closest for this example, and we go down here, we can define our actual center drill itself, as well as go into the parameters for it, and then we'll go to the drill itself, and then obviously the parameters. Now, the interesting part is with the 2 different groups, obviously you're going to have different effective depths, overall depths, if they're different depth holes, okay? In this case, it's the same depth holes, they're just at 2 different start points. So if I hit compute, just so you guys can see, you'll actually notice that it does all the drilling here, does the drilling here, and it does the drilling over here. So it actually recognizes that, the actual top of feature is actually not all the way up here, so it's not going to start drilling from up here. It's going to recognize the depth and change and actually handle that for you guys, so you don't have to go in yourself and define it. Now the nice part is, let's go ahead and mess with some of these features. So if we go in here to our actual setup, and let's just say we go to the first hole pattern right here, and let's say right here, we'll go to this one right here, and we'll say, let's edit the feature in SolidWorks. We can actually go ahead and adjust whatever the sketch is, okay, the hole diameter and everything like that. We can also go in and change the feature faces and everything like that. Okay, so just so you guys got that. All right. Okay, and we'll edit the sketch real quick. Okay, so if you look here, those are our sketch points. Okay. If you want to move a point and everything like that, you guys can alter the point. So simply by me just dragging the points around, I can change that. I can hit OK, and then hit Control B in SolidWorks, which will rebuild my geometry. But now those geometry holes are no longer valid, right? That's not there anymore. That's moved over. So I've altered something. Well, you'd have to normally go back in, and now it says, okay, well, do you want us to auto-update the CAM tree? Yeah. What it'll do is it'll actually allow us to go ahead, and we go in here, and it's processing our data. You guys can now go here and say update geometry, and then you guys just hit compute all, and boom, you guys have it adjusted to your new feature without you guys having to go back in and select and do all that stuff. Now with the actual features, we actually have a small amount of options that actually will recognize any changes, even on the 2D spectrum, if you select the body, and it will actually auto-adjust those particular features, okay? So the nice part is you guys have that with the new drilling feature, and again, just so you guys can see, if we right-click on a tool and we say, hey, backplot it, it's going to bring the backplot sequence in, and it's going to start doing its drilling process, so you guys can actually see how it's doing it. I want you guys to see it does the first level first, and then it goes down to this next level. So you guys are fully able to program it without having to sit there and pick each individual hole and everything like that. In the new BobCAM, you guys can go in and actually select the solid. Now, let's go ahead and bring back up the PowerPoint for a second and go on to the next phase. If you guys have any questions on the drilling feature, please let me know so I can go ahead and answer those as well. So what we're going to cover next is some of the new features with Gao checking. So what we did is we went into the 3-axis toolpath and we added the ability to actually bring in pieces of the models, vices, how it's going to sit, and you guys actually have the ability to go in and gouge check what is there, so that way you can have the tool. Normally when you would select the solid to program a 3D toolpath, you would cut right through this section. Now you can actually go in and select those objects and say, hey, gouge check it, retract tool, and then relink, or trim and trim the toolpath back and cut over. It just depends on the process on which you want to do it. You guys have the ability to go in and fully change that. All right. Now what's going to happen is after that, the next one we're going to cover is the new thread milling option. What we did with thread milling is we went in and we said, okay, we need tapered pipe threads. So now you guys can actually type in a taper to actually have true pipe threads output. Okay, we also now have the new thread milling tool options with the actual single point threading. Okay, you guys can go in. We also added in side roughing, so you guys can rough into the thread if you want to. All right. Give me 1 second. We have a question that's already in V5. You can select the solid from drilling. Question. Yes, you can select the solid for drilling, but it doesn't break them down into multiple sequences. So, for example, if it's the same diameter hole and it's the same depth, but they're on different Z-planes, like we had there where we had one about an inch lower than the other, it doesn't auto-recognize that in V5. Now it actually auto-recognizes and allows you guys to now use one drilling feature. Even if the depths of the holes are different, but they're the same diameter, the software will auto-recognize and process that data for you guys. All right, the other neat one is the single-click geometry updates as well as grouping, which allows you guys to actually add grouping folders to the actual CAM tree, so you guys can link all your toolpaths into groups based on their sequence. And by adjusting and being able to handle that, you guys can blank, unblank, post, yes, no, update, no, from a group folder as opposed to having to go through the sequence of features. All right. So let's go ahead and pause that for a second, grab up the software for us. All right. And so what I mean by that is, so let's just add a couple more features into the tree. Let's just add the 2-axis profile. We'll just hit finish. Let's add another profile. And then let's add another drilling cycle. Now sometimes when you're programming a part, you might have 10, 15, 5, 6, 7, 8, a mass amount of features, let's just say. I want to go in and actually group them together. So what I can do is I can right-click here, go down to additional functions under the machine setup, and by picking this, I can say add a group. What that group does, I can actually call it drilling. So you click on it, and you guys can actually go ahead and click on it once, click on it again. All right. So let's grab this. Let's throw the drill in there. Grab this, throw that drill in there. And if you guys look now, your group actually has the drills in it, for example. So the nice part is with having the drill there, I can minimize that. And then if I add in another group, additional functions, add a group, I can throw the other toolpaths in that particular second group. That way I have groupings where I can minimize them. That way I keep everything nice and solid. So you guys can actually go in and group stuff together and make everything. All right. So let's go ahead now. Okay. So we actually have a question here on can you rename the groups? Yes, you right-click on the group, you go down to rename, and then you call it what you need. And then you can go in here and say, okay, let's go down here to the actual group, rename this, and you guys can call it milling if you wanted to. And what will happen now is those are named that particular sequence, so you guys can actually go in and adjust it. And like I said, what's nice about it is when you right-click on the actual group folder, I could actually go in here for the drilling and I could say, let's blank them. And then what it does now is when I go away from that, it's going to go ahead and blink out my toolpaths for me. Okay? And the same goes down here for the actual milling feature. When you actually right-click on it and you hit blank, it'll actually blink out those features as well. So as you guys can see there, you'll actually have the particular blanked out holes themselves that you guys can then go ahead and process as well. Now, another neat feature, I'm going to go ahead and grab the other part I was talking about, so bear with me for just a second. So this one in particular, you guys can go ahead and you have this part here, okay? So one of the nice parts about the way this outputs, we're going to go ahead and just get rid of all this stuff here. We'll go to additional functions, delete all features, okay? So this has multiple different, elevation changes, different pieces to cut. I can right-click and go through and, pick the ones I want to use and then pick the toolpath. If you go down to mill 2 axis now and you hit select geometry and you pick the select whole bodies and you just hit OK, look what the software does. It actually recognizes the different pieces for you, okay? What's nice is you can just go down in a sequence now and you can customize them. So you could go down here to the feature and it'll tell you what shape it is. Okay, that's that upper profile. Well, that's fine. We can leave it with the profile. Okay, and you would go through and you'd set up your machining strategy. You guys would go in and define the profile with the rough and the finish and the settings for that, depending on how you want that to output in particular. The other nice side is you guys go down here to the actual next one. So let's say we go to feature 1. That is this profile shape. Okay, awesome. We can go in and customize that as well, cutting out the outer profile and in between here. Okay, and then you go down to feature 2. Okay, this is this slot here, that's fine as well. We can use profile on that. And then the last feature is going to be the pocket. What we can do with the pocket is we can go in and change the strategy now to a pocketing feature. Hit next, which will update that option. Just so you know, we can hit compute and it calculates. Now, necessarily you might have pieces that are being machined that maybe you don't want it to machine. Okay? So we have the features here. You can click on it to update and it'll show you this geometry. Now the nice part is if you go ahead and make a change to the actual solid, it can update the toolpaths together without you guys having to go through the whole process of it. But the nice part is I have my toolpaths now. So I can actually go ahead and, as you guys can see, if we launch the simulation just so you guys can actually see it in action, you guys will actually see it's cutting in. I didn't have to individually go in there. I'm just setting up the cam tree now and then just letting it rip from there, and I don't have to worry about it. If I do want to go in and make changes, yes, you're still going to be able to do that, but I can save myself the hassle of having to go in and pick certain things and everything like that to make it actually output. All right, and there you go. So there it is, cutting out those options, and I didn't have to individually go in. In the older versions, you'd have to individually go in and select just this face. Then I'd have to go in and select just this feature, and just this feature. And now I don't have to do that. I can actually play off the solid, which is what it should always have been, or always be, where you actually use your solid for the programming process, and you guys don't have to worry about it. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to move on to the next phase, and that is covering the thread mill feature itself. So one of the nice parts about, obviously, the new thread feature is you can actually go in and select the piece. All right, give me 1 second. I'm just going to create us a small little feature real quick, guys, so we can actually use the thread mill. So just so you guys can see a little bit, if you guys have never, used SolidWorks yourself, you can go in, we'll start a sketch real quick, we'll pick the top plane, we will go here and select the actual sketch here, okay, and then what we'll do is we'll do another circle inside of it, okay, like so, and then what we're going to do is we're going to go here and actually do an extrude boss of the two, and we're just going to make it high so we can select it for the actual setup. So once we have our actual piece to select, we go in and we do our setup. We're going to choose our CAM defaults. We're going to hit new job. All right, we're going to hit select geometry, select stock wizard. What it's going to do is it's going to ask us to select the model. We hit OK, and then we're going to select cylindrical stock for this one. And then what you can do is when you pick cylindrical stock, sometimes you have to adjust the axial direction. So we can actually go here and say like y-axis, and that'll line it up properly for us. And then we just go ahead and hit our machine setup. Right now our machine setup is sitting this way, right there with the Z's pointing this way. To adjust that, we can just pick origin, pick the top, and then we can choose our Z-axis and pick a vertical line, which will allow us to go ahead and actually adjust the vertical line option. Once you hit OK, you'll go like this. We'll go into the thread mill, which is its own feature now. When you pick mill thread, you hit select geometry, and you just pick the piece, and then you hit OK. Once you pick the piece, as you can see, it recognizes the whole diameter based on the drawing, as well as it picked the depth of the sleeve for us, which is nice. All we have to do is hit next and set it up. Now, one of the nice parts is on all drilling features now you have the groove retract option, plane, cylinder, spear, depending on how you're outputting your actual retract, depending on the type of part. Okay. Now what we're going to do here is we're actually going to go ahead after that on the thread mill. We're going to hit next. What's cool is you guys can actually go in and set up, center drill, maybe a reamer, depending on how you guys are trying to do it. If I go ahead and I just pick the mill thread, because that's what we're worried about now. Again, you have the multiple sequence because it is technically a drilling op you can use. You go down here to the actual single point. You guys can set up now a single point threading tool, which is nice. And then you also have the pattern options. This is where you're going to find the side roughing ability, where you guys can rough in multiple passes going into the side, as well as you guys are going to have top down, bottom up, inside, outside, and then G41, G42 output. When you go to the patterns, though, you guys can go in and set up your thread diameter, your thread height, your thread pitch, your threads per revolution, which changes the type of tool. Just for example, so you guys can see if I change this to 10, it'll actually change the type of thread tool I can select. Okay. So when you change those threads per revolution, that is what alters that. The nice part is after that, you guys have the tapered angle where you guys can go in if you need to do a pipe thread now. You just type in the taper of that angle, or the angle of that thread, and it'll go ahead and handle that process for you. Once you go ahead and output that, you just hit OK, and now you have your thread feature. So there's a regular thread mill feature. Now we can also go in, edit it, and let's just add like a 5-degree taper. Hit recompute, and now as you can see, if I go ahead and I make the solid viewable through here, you guys can zoom in and actually see the tapered portion of the thread. It now processes it all for you. All right, do we have any questions on any of that stuff? Guys, go ahead and type those away if you do have a question on that particular setup. All right. So that's covering some of the new milling features. Just to give you guys a little taste of some of the stuff, there are a lot of other features that we've also integrated in there and stuff like that to help you guys. What we're going to do is we also went in and improved calculation times for some of the toolpaths. We went in and actually upgraded, like, pocket and advanced rough to help calculate up to 70% better improvement on inside and outside shapes. Open pockets, closed pockets, and that way you guys can speed up not only your calculation time but also the way it outputs. Now, an interesting option, if we go back here, that I want to cover is on this particular piece. You guys can go in and edit the feature, okay? When you're actually going through your actual profile, there is tabbing for you guys. If you guys need to hold on to a piece of it, you guys can actually output a tab on a profile, okay? Now, the neat part too is actually on here, okay? When you're in the geometry selection, okay, you're going to have the ability right here. If you look, there's an auto Gao Check. You guys can shut that off, turn that on when needed, okay? Depending on how you guys want it to output, you guys will have that on all the tools. I forgot to cover that when we were doing the geometry selection. You guys can actually go in here and auto group, and then you have your retract plane, your tolerance, and then your Gao Check. So you guys can go in and process that data on the left-hand side when you guys are setting everything up. All right. Now give me 1 second. We're going to grab the next piece and continue on with our processing of our data. All right. Now, the nice part is what I was talking about earlier, too, is there are little things that are in the software now that normally aren't. One of the best parts is being able to go in here, edit on a profile, go down to the actual parameters tab, turn on multiple depths, and you have an option called minimize retracts and then link to rapid. Minimize retracts allows us, if we do multiple depths of cut, for example, it'll allow us to keep the tool down as opposed to always having to wrap it up and then, go back down, wrap it up, go back down. We can actually limit the retracts to where it just continuously keeps going down as opposed to coming up. So you guys have that ability now to go in and minimize those retracts on that profile. So that way you guys have it, stepping down better. All right, so next we're going to cover a little bit of the lathe just so you guys can actually see some of the improvements. If you haven't already seen what the new lathe looks like in version 29 and stuff like that, you guys will be able to see that stuff here. So we're going to go ahead and just open up the piece for us. Now what's going to happen is with this actual piece, now what we're going to do in here is the actual new lathe, just so you guys can get a little taste of the lathe as well. Like I said, this is a sneak peek. This is just for you guys to kind of get the feel of what it is. If you guys do have other questions as well or want to know other things too, you guys can always ask those, and I'll give you the best answer possible at the time. All right, now what's going to happen is if you guys go ahead here, the new lathe, we're going to go ahead. We have the ability to trim to stock now. So when you actually have a stock model defined, you guys can say, you can say, hey, track the stock. So default operation would normally just machine all this, but maybe we don't. We have the operation with trim to stock, where it actually will go in here and handle that there's no material here, so there's no need to cut here. Let's start the cutting here and continue down and then extend as needed. So it'll actually track the stock. We also added in, normally you just have standard, turning. We also added an offset that actually follows the contour of the shape. We added a standard zigzag back and forth, and then obviously zigzag for offset, so you can cut back and forth depending on your type of cut. Now what we're going to do here is after that, go like this. You have the option for the new feature definition, OD, ID, backface, okay? So what we did is we said, okay, let's make a new little feature window when you're actually going through the process that will go in and allow you to say, oh, it's an OD cut, oh, it's an ID cut, oh, it's a face cut, or it's a backface cut. Instead of you guys having to go in and swap the tool orientation or anything like that, we went in and updated that particular parameter for you guys to see, and I'm going to show you guys that. Feature extensions allow you guys to go in and actually extend the toolpath if needed. Without having to draw extra geometry, you guys can just say extend, start and end, and it'll actually extend it. Here's some examples of it extending the actual toolpath for you guys. All right, so let's go ahead and dive in onto the lathe portion itself. All right. So what we want to do is we want to go through the setup process. So let's go in here, right-click on CAM defaults, hit new job, pick turning. You'll hit start stock wizard. You'll hit OK. What that does, that initializes our stock wizard. We want to make sure that we actually defined the coordinate system, which you should have set, your coordinate system. And then you can go in and actually define the size. So you guys can click the little arrows if you want to actually process that, or you guys can just type in what your actual stock size is. And then you guys will change the actual length for it, okay? Now, if we go ahead and let's just make this 6 inches, for example, I want you guys to see the actual stock option. We hit next. We make sure that we set up our settings here, and then we just hit OK. For the setup process, a couple things that we added in that are new with the actual turning tools. When you go into the tool library now, and you go to add an actual tool, you guys can edit the holders as well right here in the system, and that way you guys don't have to worry about it. It'll actually have all the data that we need properly for you guys to go in and edit. There are some predefined tool holders you guys can manipulate as well. You guys can still select custom tool holders and custom tool geometry, but again, we already have some defined for you, so you guys can actually use these. Now, once we go in here, let's blank this out, right-click on Machine Setup. As you'll notice, the toolpaths are broken down. If you have used Lathe in BobCAM before, you'll actually need to understand that sometimes you had to go in and use the same feature, and you would have grooving under there as well. Now they're their own individual features for you to select. So, for example, if we pick Lathe Turning, and we hit Select Geometry, and we go in, you guys can actually pick the faces you want to machine and not have to worry about anything, or you guys can go in and select everything else. But if I go ahead, just for example, and I pick these faces, I'll go ahead and hit OK. What it'll allow me to do is hit Next. And this is the new Features tab I was talking about that actually allows you guys to go in and supply whether it's an OD or an ID cut. We also added in the ability for you guys to select, from stock, from geometry, so that way if you do have stock that is bigger, you guys say from stock, and the Toolpath calculates to where the stock model ends or starts, and it'll actually cut all the proper data down it. You guys also have the ability to do from geometry, which would just be the highest point of the geometry, and then custom allows you guys to pick a custom height you want the toolpath to go to. You guys also have extension, which allows you guys to, again, extend the start and the end of the toolpath. And then if we hit Next, we can go in here and actually choose rough and finish, pattern repeat. If you notice, though, it's only the roughing for turning. It's actually not grooving, it's not facing, it's just that particular setup. Again, you have the new tool page because you have all the info for the tool. You guys have the actual ability to go in here and say show tool holder so you can see the orientation. Now what will happen is if I go in here and I hit Next, I can choose standard or offset depending on how I want that to go. I can choose standard or offset. And then I also have the ability to go down and choose zig or zigzag. So, zig standard or zigzag, back and forth. You guys also have on the next page to do an overlap. Sometimes when you're doing a cut, you might want to overlap to the previous cut so you don't have big blocky steps. You can go in here and actually say overlap to previous cut or no overlap or a custom distance that you guys would like it to travel, and you guys can set that particular parameter. All right, so now after we say previous cut, we're going to hit Next. We have our default on rapid, but the nice part is the lead-in options now for the actual lathe makes it so nice for us because we can go in and choose parallel, perpendicular. We no longer have to sit there and always define that particular point at which we want it to come in. All right, and then if we go ahead and we just hit compute, there's your data. Boom, just like that. Now we have a question, can you use the backplot on the lathe just like we do on the mill? Yes, you can right click here, do a backplot. What that's going to allow us to do is, again, bring in that tool, we can hit play, and we can watch it actually backplot our piece. And again, you can slow it down so you can actually see your steps. Hit restart and play, and you guys can actually watch it travel across your part. All right. Now, an interesting piece as well, when you guys go up here, you right-click, you hit post, you also can go in and generate your setup sheets. So that way you guys can actually launch your setup sheets and look at that. Now our system actually takes a photo of your screen so you can have your part and your setup in the actual setup for you. Whoever's running the job can go in and define your different settings and everything like that as well. All right. Okay. So now that gives a cover of the little sneak peeks that are in the lathe as well. There's obviously a lot of different functions and a lot of different options now. We actually have a full list of things that we've added into it that we will be releasing shortly so you guys can actually see all the improvements. The idea behind this webinar today was to actually showcase you guys just a little bit of what's to come. We do appreciate you guys taking the time to look at everything. If you guys do have questions, I will leave the chat open if you want to ask if BobCAM is going to have a specific feature. And we'll obviously be putting together more webinars to tailor specific parts of the mill and the lathe. as it gets closer to our releasing time. But we wanted to give you guys just a little small taste of what's to come. It's amazing what we're actually adding. So we will be going in there and adding. If you guys do have questions on the specific dates and stuff like that, we can get you guys that info on when it's coming out. And we can even start to get together maybe some pricing as it gets closer to that particular date on what it would be to upgrade. I do appreciate you guys coming to the webinar today. And like I said, if you have any questions, please shoot me an email. I'll be glad to answer any of your questions. Thank you.